Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we reopen our mailbag to take questions from our listeners. A lot of off-season focused questions coming in, even though we're not technically in the off-season just yet, but there are some prospect questions and more Birdland related topics in this week's mailbag. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by Bet Online. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, to political props. Head to the website today. Get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet online, the game starts here. And on tonight's episode, we will take questions from our listeners. I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in with this question from the Bird is the Word from Discord. And by the way, all of our questions tonight, at least so far, come from our Discord channel. The Bird is the Word wants to know what your, quote, dream off season would look like. And on the flip side of that, what's a realistic offseason look like? And with that, I will start with Nick.
Let me get maybe I wasn't ready when I said I'm ready to start. All right, here we go. It's dream off season. More just, I mean, I haven't like fully dove into this off season stuff yet because the World Series isn't even over. It's still only October and there's lots of other sports going on right now. But just generally kind of looking at things. I read Andy Costco's piece this morning. I don't know if you guys read that, or he had a quote from an industry source that basically said Corbin Burns is probably getting 300 million, which I think a lot of us assumed. I don't doubt that at all. So for my dream offseason, I'm going to say they get priced out of Burns. Someone decides to just break the bank for Corbin Burns. Have at it. Orioles get the draft pick. Instead, we're going to trade for Luis Castillo. Let's take on that salary. Let's sign Max Fried. Give us a rotation of Fried, Castillo, Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, and Dean Kramer. Mix and match number 5 starter if you want to. Sign Christian Walker. Bring back Anthony Santander. Or like take the draft picks from Burns and Santander and sign Teoscar Hernandez. That's my dream offseason. I think realistic offseason, same thing. Like, why can't we do those things? Like, honestly, like, I don't know. I've been hesitant this entire time. I've said it many times on the show. I've been so hesitant about like the amount of money we're going to see being spent by this front of this new ownership group. But I don't know. I guess I'm just now buying in more. Maybe it's more so just because like we're here on the verge of the offseason, frustrations from how last season ended. I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm really buying into that hype, buying into those quotes a little bit more. Now that it's late October, almost November, I think Elias is going to surprise a lot of people. So like I don't see why we couldn't go after one of the big starters like Snell or Fried, trade for a Luis Castillo type arm, and be in on one of the big bets. There aren't very many big bets to go after, so I'm sure prices are going to be insane. But why not go after a Christian Walker type as well? So yeah, I'm going to say my realistic offseason is equivalent to my dream offseason.
I like that. I like that a lot. I'm gonna take dream and mean it. Pipe dream maybe. Juan Soto, come on down. New right fielder, Gold Glove defense, cannon for an arm. He can hit a little bit too. You bring Santander back, whether it's qualifying offer, probably not. I don't think he's getting 6 or 7 years like I've seen some outlets predict, but maybe you bring him back. Then you use Kerstad and whoever else to trade for Garrett Crochet. And you sign Max Fried. And maybe in this scenario, Mountcastle and O'Hearn can stay at first base for now. And you just go own the world. I think that would be nice. That would be my dream off season. My realistic off season, again, just like Nick, I haven't like dove super deep because I think our off season preview will be next week. I'm planning to do a little more research before then, but basically my realistic would be you sign a Christian Walker type for first base. You sign a Teoscar Hernandez at the high end, or I can't remember the guy that I was mentioning as the backup option or the secondary option outfielder first base type. Mark Canha, there it is. Then you sign or trade for a mid-tier arm. I think there's plenty of options. Sean Manaea, you say Kikuchi, or trade for a guy like Luis Castillo. That seems more realistic. But yeah, I do think that anyone's dream offseason could be realistic. Under new ownership, it's just a matter of let's see it in fact rather than just quotes in the media, and if that's what Elias wants to do, because ultimately I think we have a good owner who's going to let the baseball guy do the baseball stuff, which is a good thing, whether it's a metrically sexy offseason or not.
I'll meld your dream off seasons together a little bit. I'll take Juan Soto in right field next year. I will bring Anthony Santander back, so I'll have Soto and Santander in the same lineup. I will trade for Luis Castillo. That would be, for me, the really big ticket items of the offseason, but I'm going to put the other thing out there. I'm extending Gunnar Henderson this offseason too. Get the big move done out of the way, give him a 12-year extension. Now you've got the next decade plus set with him as your franchise cornerstone. And to round things out, to short the rotation, I'm bringing in Nathan Eovaldi. Success in the American League East, postseason success, checks off so many boxes. Realistically, what's going to happen this offseason, I think the Orioles are going to be more active in free agency, but I think that someone in the Kikuchi, Eovaldi tier is going to be top contract for them. I could see Teoscar Hernandez as a viable alternative to Santander, and one that I would welcome if the Dodgers don't decide to just outbid everybody to keep him. And maybe you see a kind of under the radar, smaller extension or two, but it won't be Gunnar.
Yeah, the Gunner extension. I've said it before. If that's all they do, I mean, hopefully it's not, but I wouldn't be that upset because that's like he's a superstar that we have at home. Let's keep him at home. I think that's job number one for any capable franchise. So yeah, add that to my dream off season as well.
Go down to the next question now from Kevin Brown. What would you describe as a bad offseason for the O's? And I'll start with Bob on this one.
Yeah, since I was supposed to ask that question and I was just letting you do all the work. A bad offseason would be, and of course Kevin Brown is the one asking this question, gotta be you. So thanks, Kevin, for the question. It was nice to meet you again at the live show. Bad offseason, I'd say don't offer Santander the qualifying offer. A bad offseason to me feels like something that is never going to happen, like these stupid mistakes that a team like the Rockies would make. But all right, even if common sense prevails and they do offer Santander the qualifying offer because it's a no-brainer, I think just not doing anything, not locking up anyone long-term, no extensions. Maybe they bring back Kyle Gibson to shore up the rotation. If they keep making moves like it's 2022, 2021, then maybe it's a bad offseason. But honestly, outside of just literally doing nothing, I just can't imagine how this front office with ownership being this on board can have a quote-unquote bad offseason. And no matter what we do, someone will say it was a bad offseason. So, and probably Kevin Brown will be one of those people. But it would take a lot, I feel like, to be officially a bad offseason.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. signing, like looking through the free agent list earlier, like signing like Andrew Haney and calling it a day, to kind of
Adam
round out,
Frazier.
yeah, to like round out the rotation there, like, and just kind of be like, all right, we're going to rely on these younger players. Like we're going to say Colton Cowser takes the next step forward. We're going to say Jackson Holiday and or Kobe Mayo take that big leap forward next year. The rotation stays healthy. Maybe injury variance swings back into the favor of the Orioles, or at least kind of evens out a little bit compared to the last 2 years. But yeah, I do think it's kind of. I was even almost thinking like maybe this is going back to like my dream offseason scenario. Like, what if it's not Andrew Haney, but you go up a tier to the tier Zach was talking about, the Yusei Kikuchi or Nathan Eovaldi tier, and like that's the one big free agent signing, and that's it. Like, would that be a failure? It wouldn't be my ideal offseason, but I wouldn't call that like a bad offseason if it's just that. But yeah, I just think there's too much optimism. I don't want to see. I don't want to hear more reports all the time like the Orioles were in on this guy. They made the competitive offer. Like, I get it's a two-way street. You can offer the money, and some guys, it's of course money is the primary motivation there, but there are a lot of other factors at play here, and I get that. It's not as easy as just throwing money at problems all the time. But like I want to see the Orioles be extremely aggressive, even on some of these mid-tier guys. Like if you have to overpay a couple $1 million, overpay the couple $1 million this year. Like don't be afraid to give an extra 10 million or so to one of these mid-tier pitching guys. That's all I want to see. It's they have the capabilities to make some massive swings again this offseason, which I think they will make at least one. But just don't be content with what this roster is right now, because it's great, it's young, it's promising, but like it needs some infusion of something. And hopefully this front office knows better than me as to what that infusion is, and hopefully they're aggressive in going to get it.
It's a great point about what I was going to say about the new ownership is, yeah, we have the money. If we want a guy, there should be no reason that we can't get that guy unless it's like a bidding war with the Dodgers or the Yankees, or I mean, in very small chance circumstance. But if they want to go get Sean Manaea, there should be nothing stopping them from getting Sean Manaea here. I mean, you have a billionaire ownership, and I know Mike Elias and company don't want to overpay for value, but when you have the means to do it, you might as well do it. So
I'll say a bad off season for me. Just going through some possible things that could happen on the extreme worst case scenario, but won't. One of the things we're going to talk about in a little bit is club options on some key players. If all three of those club options, Ryan O'Hearn, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Danny Coulombe, were declined, and all three of those players left, or two of those three players left, I would consider that a massive failure. On top of that, if you wanted to make the offseason really bad, don't do anything to the lineup and make the only starting pitching move be a move for a pitcher that you have to bring back from injury and or ineffective stuff. So if, in other words, the only starter the Orioles bring in this offseason is someone like Shane Bieber, where you have to hope that somehow you can fix him, I'm not going to be real happy with that, because they already have to try to fix Trevor Rogers. They've already got some in-house projects. There's no need to go out and bring another one in if you're not going to do anything to improve the top of the rotation. If you improve the top of the rotation, solidify the middle, and go for someone that maybe you catch lightning for a bottle, I have no problems with that. But if the lightning in the bottle move is the only move this offseason for the pitching staff, I would consider that a really bad offseason.
Yeah, I like the Bieber thing. I'd be on board with that. But yeah, don't make that be like the one thing and be like, all right, if he hits, we really nailed this offseason. Like a lot has to go right. And he's coming off, Tommy John surgery, or bringing in, a lower tier pitcher. I'm trying to go through this list real quick. I don't even know, like whoever, one of the lower tier arms, and then like a Walker Bueller, like the high upside, again, we got to fix them. I don't want, you can sign those fixer-upper types, but you can bring in another project or two to stash down in AAA. But like after you've brought in the ace of your staff and you've brought in another like mid-rotation veteran starter who's been around the block and can really solidify this rotation, because look, if Cade Povich has to start the year in AAA, so be it. Like I hope he has to start the year back in AAA because they've addressed this pitching staff. You can never have too many arms as we saw last year. And
Yes,
we've
the
got
Dodgers.
yeah, exactly. Like you've got so much good depth. If you can start the year with Brandon Young, Chase McDermott, well, Chase McDermott, I think maybe find a home in the bullpen to start the year, but Chase McDermott, Brandon Young, Cade Povich starting out as Norfolk's AAA rotation, like that's a dream scenario as well.
Yeah, and if I could just expound, the Corbin Burns trade, fantastic. But we saw, because as Andy, past co-host of the show, Andy Koska, said, he's probably going to get $300 million. So it was most likely a one and done scenario. It was awesome, but that's a lot of pressure. So if you're going to trade for your ace of the staff for next year, have it be a guy like Sonny Gray or Luis Castillo or Garrett Crochet, who is under control for at least 2 seasons. Cost might be more, but at least you have extended that timeline of having that guy.
So talking about pitchers and signing free agents, Birdfan23 asks, is it fair to assume that when it comes to pitchers, the Orioles will target those options that are projected for only 1 or 3 year deals, unless it's a Corbin Burns / Max Fried, those being the only guys they're willing to go 5 or 6 years for. So do we think the Orioles are only going to be targeting guys on short-term deals?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I don't think that is going to change as far as just the philosophy of the front office. Like, it's not smart to sign free agent pitchers because they're usually older and more injury prone to super long deals because it almost never works out. As you can see, even Luis Castillo, who has yet to really falter, his trade value on Baseball Trade Values, the best and most accurate website on the internet, is -30. So that contract is dinging his trade value apparently. So yeah, I could see where in the past there have been reports where the Orioles were only willing to go 2 years on a guy like Jameson Taillon. Maybe that is they're willing to go to 3 now with new ownership and less restrictions. So it should be more competitive when it comes to these 1 to 3 year type of guys like we talked about before. But I don't think the philosophy of not going beyond 3 years for a starting pitcher who's not a legitimate ace is going to change. And yeah, maybe Max Fried, you would go 6 seasons. I'm sure they would go 6 seasons for Burns, but someone's probably going to go 10. So yeah, I think that's pretty much accurate.
Yeah, I would agree because I think that kind of is the starting rotation class this year. It's a lot of guys who are probably going to command 1 to 3 year deals. If someone wants to be really aggressive on Blake Snell, they could possibly push it to 5 or 6. Fried, I think, falls somewhere in that range on the top end, and then you have Burns. Who knows what Burns is going to get? It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 8. I don't know, but I know regardless that if there's one pitcher this offseason who's getting a long-term deal that pays him a lot of money, it's going to be Burns. And just putting this out there because we're already hearing rumblings about how TV deals could affect spending again this winter. That's been brought up nationally by people who are frankly a lot more qualified to talk about that subject than I am. There's always one pitcher every offseason that gets screwed over by that. And I hope for his sake it's not Max Fried. But if that trend does carry into this offseason, there's going to be a pitcher or two who signs late in the winter for a lot less in terms of years than what people are expecting. So I wouldn't assume automatically that someone other than Corbin Burns is in that 5 to 6 year tier.
It might be Blake Snell again, to be honest with you. And if it is, I'm all over that. 1 or 2 year deal, even 3 for Blake Snell. 3 years, 100 million. If his market doesn't, come into view like he wants it, then bring him home. We wanted him at the deadline. If he's there for the right price, why not grab him now?
It's going to be interesting to see just because you also see a lot of guys. You saw what happened to all the Boris clients last offseason, and everybody's dropping Boris. So, like, what impact is that going to have this offseason? I think throw some short-term deals at these guys and just unload the bank on them. Like, we've got the money, we've got this ownership now. Like, come on, I just want to see the money flowing, and I honestly do think we will especially with these arms though. I'm like Blake Snell. Well, that's kind of bleeding into the next question, but you've got some really good options that I think the Orioles will be in on and be aggressive on. But at the same time, I think the big splash is going to come via trade again. It may not be the Burns 1 year deal guy, but I don't know. I feel like they've really hit these trades with pitchers. The Zach Eflin deal, unbelievable deal so far. Corbin Burns trade, I think was a fantastic deal. Love you, Joey, but that was a fantastic deal. I don't know. I think this team has been pretty good lately at navigating these deals for top flight arms. I'd like to see them try it again this offseason.
Yeah, well, let's go to the next question because I would never forget that it's my turn to say it. As we know, the bird is the word. Would like to know, who would you target in free agency this offseason? So who's like the one guy that you're like, this is who I want the Orioles to get no matter what? Zach?
It's Eovaldi, just for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Just the resume that he has, the impact he can make. Is he going to finish in the top 5 for Cy Young voting? No, but if you have him in the rotation to pair with a trade acquisition, Eflin, Rodriguez, Kramer, that's a really, really good rotation going into next year. And that this is a guy that's not going to be afraid of the big moment. He's shown time and time again he's a very good postseason pitcher. And the other thing is he has AL East success. And if the Orioles are going to be in a tight race again with the Yankees or another team in this division, which they will be, that he's not going to fold under the pressure in that situation. So I would give Eovaldi 2-3 year deal, bring him in. I think that would do wonders for the rotation. And if Anthony Santander does not come back, Teoscar Hernandez is the first player that I'm going to. Right-handed bat, gives you good power. Even his quote-unquote down year in 2023 with the Mariners was not that bad of a season. And he put up good numbers this year in Dodger Stadium, which is not exactly a hitter's haven. So I don't have that concern that he can't get it over the wall at Camden Yards.
Especially the time in Seattle after this season that they had and all the stuff that's come out about the offensive, especially right-handed hitters in that ballpark. Yeah, it definitely adds a wrinkle.
A lot of good options there. I am in my scenario here. If we're only going with one here, which I like that premise for the question. If I'm only targeting my one must-have guy, my caveats are that I'm assuming Santander comes back. I'm assuming, again, going back to the trades, it's not just Luis Castillo. It's Framber Valdez. It's Crochet. There are a lot of really good arms that I think teams will, even competing teams, are going to be willing to deal this offseason. And the Orioles, we know, have the firepower. And you're going to get, hopefully, you're going to get at least one comp pick, ideally 2, hopefully not 3, because that would involve Santander leaving, but keep Santander. You're going to get 2 draft picks. I'm not concerned about, trading more of the prospects. So assuming all that's the case, we trade for the arm, Santander's back. My go-to guy, I think it's Christian Walker. I think we're going to talk about Ryan Mountcastle in a later question. Of course, and also excluding Juan Soto, because that's the easy answer, I think, for everything here. Every team's dream scenario is Juan Soto, but I want Christian Walker. I think Ryan Mountcastle, as we're going to talk about soon, I think he's easily replaceable bat as far as being an Oriole is concerned. We'll dive into that caveats later on. But Christian Walker, man, 30 home run guy, good walk numbers, 118, 120, 125 WRC plus consistently the last many years. Bring me that big power right-handed hitting bat in this lineup and bring him back home. Let's have him finish his career where it all started.
That was going to be one of my guys. I was going to cheat and say a hitter and a pitcher, but now I don't have to because Christian Walker was going to be one of them. I agree, just super consistent. And what was I going to say? Oh, also he plays great defense at first base. I think he's continually been one of the best defending first basemen since he got into the league. So, yeah, Christian Walker, totally co-sign that. And for me, on the pitcher side, if the team is planning to keep Cade Povich and not use him in a deal for the next big pitcher that comes in, Max Fried is the perfect, bring him in-house. Bring the guy that everyone thinks Cade Povich reminds him of in-house and let him learn. just like I'm hoping that Bradish and Rodriguez learned from Burns being here this season. Bring in Max Fried and let him just take Povich under his wing, and then hopefully you have two of them in a year or two. And I also have the next question, of course. Billy would like to know, will James McCann be someone's opening day catcher in 2025, which I guess I could bring up this question from the chat as well. Randy would like to know, do we sign James McCann? I think if we lose Santander, have lost Hayes, we really need him for his play and his veteran presence. Nick?
He's not going to be somebody's starting catcher on opening day in 2025. I hope he's back with the Orioles. I would not be mad at all. We're going to have a question about Basayo as well. Basayo is not going to be on the opening day roster. Basayo's a long ways away as far as catching is concerned. Adley, I'm convinced something, like a lot of people, I think, is convinced he was just not healthy last season. I liked what McCann did. And you look offensively, like the 80, what do you have, an 89 WRC plus? Yeah, 89 WRC plus. So, I mean, when you adjust that for catchers, that was pretty good. He was 29th in the majors among catchers with at least 200 plate appearances. I'll take that. Post All-Star break, James McCann hit 262 with a 785 OPS. That was a 200-point increase in OPS compared to pre-All-Star break James McCann. The guy took a pitch to the face, stayed in the game, so Adley wouldn't have to catch game 2 of the doubleheader. He's clearly a veteran leader in this clubhouse. You can nitpick some of the defensive metrics, and maybe the Orioles could go out and improve upon that, especially considering Adley's weaknesses behind the plate. But I would not be mad at all if McCann is back on this roster. I know it would make my dad very happy. I think he's ready to build a James McCann statue after he took the fastball to the face. But bring him back. I have no issues with that at all. Bring him back on a 1-year deal. Help continue to bridge that gap for, Basayo, Willems, whoever it is, the prospect that really hits and breaks out. Bring him back.
I don't think McCann starts somewhere next year, but I think that he has a job in the league as long as he wants one. And if he does want one, I think the Orioles should look at bringing him back. And honestly, that's kind of what I expect to happen unless they decide that they really want to curtail Adley's playing time. And we're never going to, I agree with what John Mullally wrote in the banner recently. We're never going to know what happened with Adley in the second half this year. So the Orioles probably won't want to concede that they need to reduce his usage. And if that's the case, bring McCann back. You have a role that works for him. And I'm just, I know that there is a lot of discussion around his defense and where it could be better. And I see all of those points. But at the end of the day, is that really what costs the Orioles down the stretch this year? That's just a really, really small thing to nitpick that I think you could drive yourself nuts trying to fix it and end up in the exact same spot. You could bring in Austin Hedges because Austin Hedges is a much better defender than McCann, which he is, but he's also a worse hitter. So how much are you really gaining there? So unless there's a scenario where the backup catcher is going to have to take on a higher workload because Adley is going to play less, then I think McCann is back.
I like Austin Hedges because I do think his defense, as long as the challenges, pitch like balls and strikes aren't able to be challenged, I do think he gives an edge when it comes to framing and that kind of stuff. But it is like having a pitcher in your lineup when he's in there. So could definitely see. I would have no problem keeping McCann around. My wife would be happy. I think he's clearly a stable presence in the clubhouse. I think he's well liked, just super steady guy. I honestly would be surprised if he's not back with the Orioles at this point. But yeah, I think no. Is he starting? Unless there's a knock on wood injury for Adley in spring training. No, I don't think he's going to be a starter for anybody.
I like it. All right, we talked about those guys with options. So this one's from Connor Newcomb, host of Locked On Orioles, another fantastic Orioles podcast. You have to decline one of these team options. Ryan O'Hearn at $8 million, Sir Anthony Dominguez at $8 million, Danny Coulombe at $4 million. You got to pick one to decline. Who are you declining, Zach?
I thought about this and I would go with Dominguez just because the volatility factor we saw on display with him really with the Phillies even before he joined the Orioles this year. The guy has very good stuff, but he also has a tendency to give up the long ball. And given the success that players like Coulomb and like Jacob Webb have had after coming over to the Orioles, I feel like that they would find a way to make up for the production that Dominguez loses. In reality, I don't want the Orioles to decline that option. I want them to pick that up and have him setting up Felix Bautista next year. But if I had to pick one of those options to decline, I would go with Dominguez because I think Colomb adds a dimension to this bullpen that we didn't realize we absolutely needed until he missed a significant chunk of the year with an injury. And if you can keep O'Hearn to the role that Ryan O'Hearn should have, which is a platoon bat between first base and DH, he's going to give you that $8 million in production.
Yeah, I think all of these options are fair for the players. Well, actually, $4 million for Cologne was a steal, so that's definitely not the one I'm going to decline. I think he's like secretly like the MVP of the bullpen, other than Felix Bautista when he's healthy. I just think you can put him in any spot, and yeah, he's not going to blow you away, but he's crafty. He knows how to. He's like the Darren O'Day of this era of the Orioles bullpen for me. I'm going to decline Ryan O'Hearn's option, and it's not going to stop me from trading Ryan Mountcastle. Sorry, Ben and company Mountie fans. I just think I think it's fair contract for Ryan O'Hearn, but like we're saying, if we're going to go after a guy like Christian Walker or some other guy that can stand at first base and not have to be platooned, then I think there are better ways you can utilize first base / DH, especially if you want to get Heston Kjerstad some more regular playing time. If you want to get Samuel Basayo up at the end of the year, that's a little bit further down the line. But I think if you want to utilize the DH spot against right-handed pitching and you don't want to trade Heston Kjerstad and you want to potentially bring back Santander, then I think I'd rather have those guys as an option more than O'Hearn. Most likely, I think they're going to pick it up no matter what. Even if they want to try to trade Ryan O'Hearn at some point, I think they'll pick it up because it is a very reasonable deal that could be traded if they need to. But for me, it's Ryan O'Hearn, which I love the story. I love the way that he came in on a minor league deal and revamped his career with the Orioles. I'd love to see it continue, but unfortunately, I just think this team is too loaded and potentially loaded when it comes to new acquisitions to warrant it if everything goes according to plan.
Just him taking jabs at the Twitter trolls is worth the $8 million to bring him back. Loved it. Yeah, if I have to pick one, I'm going with O'Hearn as well. Like Dominguez, like Zach said, wasn't always super reliable, but he stepped up when Craig Kimbrell collapsed. Let's say that 3 times fast, or don't, because we don't need to speak his name anymore. But like you're going to have Felix Bautista back next season. Hopefully, it's more comforting the fact that there was like at least the thought of, it wasn't going to happen, but at least the thought of, could Felix Bautista come back at the end of 2024 and pitch in the playoffs? Because his timeline of returning from Tommy John surgery lined up fairly well. He's going to be fully healthy, hopefully this offseason. We've seen the videos over and over that he posts on Instagram. He's been throwing for a while. So if he's fully ready to go for 2025, but he's also still like fresh off Tommy John surgery. So I like just having that option of Dominguez to fall back on, helping Bautista ease in with Sir Anthony Dominguez, not in the 9th inning role, but combining with Coulomb and Webb, I think that's going to be a really effective bullpen. So I'm going to bring him back. Yeah, the $8 million to some might be a little scary for a guy who's up and down and isn't going to be relied upon to be that 9th inning guy anymore, but I'll gladly pay $8 million for Dominguez to come back and see what happens. Coulomb was the easy one to say, yes, you're accepting that one for $40 million. Honestly, he's probably become one of my favorite arms on this staff. I think Zach also said last week the Minnesota Twins were the gift that keeps on giving when we were talking about Juan Rojas. That is true in many different ways, because I thank you for Danny Coulomb. And yeah, Ryan O'Hearn's like, he's been an asset to this organization. I think it's a fantastic pickup, but yeah, if I'm picking one in real life, I hope they do pick up the $8 million option. And if you need to reconfigure the first base DH role, like Bob was kind of talking about, go for it. You're not talking about big contracts with Mountcastle or O'Hearn, but in this scenario, see you later, O'Hearn. Thank you for everything you did.
We'll stick on the topic of first base with this question from Bobby Jones. What is a realistic return for Mountcastle? We've pied in the sky about Seattle pitcher, but that seems like way too much. Start with Bob here.
It's way too much if you're thinking that Mountcastle alone is going to get you one of the Seattle pitchers, and I'm talking Logan Gilbert, Brian Wu. And like I was saying before we started, the names are slipping out of my top of the mind as I've taken a little bit of a break from baseball. The other pitcher, Bryce Miller, there it is. Yeah, I think you need to do like a Mountcastle plus Kerstad plus Povich, something like that. But I still think that he could be a cog in a trade of that nature. Or, like I was saying, the trade value of Luis Castillo being in the negatives, and maybe it's not quite as bad as that, but maybe you could do Mountcastle and, I don't know, some other mid to bottom of the top 50 prospect for Luis Castillo, and maybe a reliever or money, or I don't know, whatever they can figure out. Maybe there's something there. But I just continue to see, like, Mountcastle's trade value, according to baseballtradevalues.com, is 4.3, which is pretty low for a guy that's got 2 years of control left. So, yeah, you're not going to get a ton, but I do think he's more useful in trade than he will be to the Orioles in 2025.
Yeah, first base DH. So obviously the value isn't going to be that high, even with the 2 years of control. Like, I don't know. I'm not trading him for, some whatever league average reliever or anything like that. I think you can at least put together a package and get something more for him. But I just think, yeah, we always talk about guys that, oh, they're more valuable to the Orioles than they are to other teams because like they're actually not that good, but like we have no other options, so we need them. But with Mountcastle, I think it's the opposite, where I agree with what Bob just said. He's more valuable to other team than the Orioles. That wall truly did break him. Like he completely tried to change his attack this year, and it didn't work. His job is to hit bombs. And he's going to strike out a lot. He's not going to walk enough. He's going to play okay defense, Gold Glove, blah blah blah, whatever. But your job is to hit 30 home runs, and he hasn't done that in a long time. He's gone from 33 home runs to 22 to 18 to 13. I know there's the vertigo and all that, but that's not an excuse when you're looking at 3-4 year sample here. Like he's a league average bat who can't hit home runs in Baltimore. So I don't really see as far as starters go, he's probably the most replaceable starter in this lineup. I'm kind of hoping for his sake he is traded, just because I think a new organization, a fresh start, I think could do wonders for Mountcastle, and he could return to that 25 plus home run guy at another team. My first thought was, I don't have specific names in mind. You guys know I don't come up with these trades, but like Cincinnati, I don't know what are some options maybe the baseball trade value says for Cincinnati, but like there's a lot of pitching over there with the Reds. And I was looking at this. I didn't think it was going to be this extreme, but according to Baseball Savant, Ryan Mountcastle would have hit 25 home runs last year in Cincinnati, nearly double his 2024 total. And that's 5 more than his next best projections, which were at Yankee Stadium and National Stadium. He had projected for 20 on Baseball Savant. So, I mean, Cincinnati is friendly to every hitter, but I don't know. Like the Reds have a fantastic pitching staff, a lot of high risk, high reward guys, but they've also drafted, Rhett Lauder, who reached the major leagues in his first year as a pro, Chase Burns. They're continuing to hammer pitcher in the draft. And you look at some of these other guys, like I'm going to dig deep here. They took 2 guys last year, Luke Holman out of LSU and Tristan Smith out of Clemson last year, 2 guys that I love. If you can work out a deal with Cincinnati and bring in pitching prospects like that back for Mountcastle, best of luck, Mountie, and I hope you hit 30 home runs with the Reds.
Yeah, if just looking at the Reds now, if you're talking about major leaguers, Fernando Cruz could be an option, Graham Ashcroft. Yeah, that's probably the two best guys. If you're not going to extend a deal and try to get like a Hunter Green or someone like that. So,
We talked about this a little bit at the live show at Checker Spot Brewing a couple weeks ago, and I said then that I thought that maybe the Orioles swing a better version of the Austin Hayes trade if they deal Mountcastle this offseason. So probably I'm thinking without specific names, and maybe next week when we have the offseason preview, I'll have some names in mind. But I'm thinking reliever with at least a season plus a team option left on his deal that could slot into medium to high leverage situations that maybe is underperforming a little bit based on his stuff. And as a general, as a probably exaggerated generalization, a lot of teams have that exact arm in their bullpen right now. And Ryan Mountcastle, for all of his ups and downs, would at least be a high upside alternative to first base for a lot of bad teams going into next year, to anybody that's coming back to those teams. So it doesn't necessarily have to be you trade him to a contender. It could be you trade him to a team that is working through a rebuild, that wants to try to catch lightning in the bottle and build his trade value back up, or that wants to flip him. Or it could be like Bob said, that he's a piece in a larger deal. I will say that I don't think the Mariners are a good fit for all of the reasons that the Orioles and Camden Yards aren't a good fit for Mountcastle, but he can find a home somewhere.
yeah, I'm looking at the Astros, and they could be an option. I mean, Trey Mancini, that trade worked out for us. So why not give him a short porch to aim for in left field? They have guys like JP France, who I know had a terrible season, but I think it could be a bounce back candidate. Spencer Arrighetti, he's got 5 years of control. Doesn't seem like the value is incredibly high, even if you want to make him part of a Framber Valdez trade. Luis Garcia has 2 years of control left. I know he's coming off of injury, but Christian Javier has 3 years of control left. Jose Urquidy. So I think maybe the Astros could be a team that Mountcastle could end up in. But let's go to Bobby Jones' next question, who says, who debuts first in 2025? Samuel Basallo, potential number one overall prospect in baseball, or Judd Fabian, the dream fourth outfielder? Zach?
I'll go with Fabian. Just based on age, experience level, he's closer to the majors now than Basallo. And because he's not a catcher, his development curve is a lot shorter. I don't think either is necessarily a slam dunk to debut next year. There could be reasons for either of them to spend all of next season in AAA. And looking at Fabian specifically, if the hit tool doesn't progress the way that I think we're hoping it will, that could be a reason to keep him down there. But on the flip side of that, we know he gives you power from the right side. And as Nico Goodrum was talking about when he was on our show last week, he has good opposite field power from the right side. He's a very good defensive center fielder. He can put together a good at bat, draw walks. So the defense and the power alone might make him a decent fourth or fifth outfielder for the last month of the season. So I give Fabian the edge right now.
Yeah, like I alluded to earlier, Samuel Basallo does not turn 21 years old until next August. So the end of the 2025 season will be approaching, and he still won't be able to go down to Smart Mouth Brewing in Norfolk and have a beer after the game. Not sponsored, but go to Smart Mouth and grab you a beer. Like Fabian's Rule 5 eligible next offseason. So like maybe there's still like that no guarantee that, like Zach said, he needs to be put on the active roster before the season ends. But it is something to consider, maybe. I don't know. I think Fabian, ideally, if you need that fourth outfield type, we've seen this organization go off and get the Aaron Hicks at the trade deadline type player to fill that role. But yeah, between the two, it's Fabian. He's older. He provides He could fill numerous different roles. He could even just be defense and speed for you on the base paths. Basayo, it's like just sit and let him bake. If I don't see him in the major leagues in 2025, that's okay. As long as he's progressing down in AAA, I don't need him up in the major leagues. I also don't think he's at a point where, certainly not at a point where you think about moving him off the position yet. Like if you're dead set on he's not going to be a catcher, he's first base DH, and he's just knocking the cover off the ball in Norfolk, sure, maybe by the end of the year, give him a shot, see what happens. But I really think you work with him and refine those defensive abilities and bring up a true, well-defined overall just stud of a prospect, even if it's in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet that Samuel Basayo will get a major league at bat in 2025. I also think it's a safe bet that it will not be before September. So I think basically, do you think Fabian's going to make the majors in 2025 is the question. And I think probably, yeah. I think probably at some point you'll need a guy, and he's right there at AAA. He's probably going to be close to as ready as he's going to get at some point next year. And if you need someone that can come off the bench with some pop against lefties especially, play great defense, he's a guy that you could easily just bring up, add him to the 40-man. You're going to do it anyway in the offseason. So, yeah, I think it's Fabian for me as well. And here's an age-old question from Randy in the chat that our Discord loves to volley back and forth at least once or twice a month or a week. If you can only keep one in 2025, is it Ramon Arias or Jorge Mateo? Nick?
Oh, man. Credit to Ramon Arias and what he did down the stretch there for this team after everyone, including myself, not everyone, but I was perfectly fine. I'm sure a lot of other people were just dumping him for nothing. If you needed DFA him. But he really came through and had some big moments for this organization down the stretch. I'm going with Mateo just because he can play second, he can play short, he can play the outfield if you need to. The speed defense, I know like the speed defense thing is not solely a reason to keep him around because the speed is useless if you can't get on base. But like Jackson Holliday is still not a proven commodity in the major leagues. I think Jorge Mateo would have been pretty helpful on this roster down the stretch as well. So if I have to keep one, I think I'm going with Mateo.
My answer to this question probably changed weekly from June 1st on this season. And I honestly kind of expect that both players are going to be back. But if I can only keep one, I'm going to agree with Nick and go with Mateo. The difference maker for me is the speed and the defense and the fact that Mateo, up until two of the most freak injuries you can have on a baseball field this season happened to him, was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Hit lefties, play an above average second base, and steal bases. That's all he needed to do, when he was doing an excellent job of it up until the first injury. And then he couldn't get things going again. Then he gets hurt a second time. I think that this year, with a more stable platoon option on the other side of that, in Jackson Holliday, who hopefully emerges as your everyday second baseman by the end of the year, and a healthy season where he doesn't get hit on the backswing of a practice swing by his teammate, Mateo puts together an above average year, or an average year, which for a bench guy is fine.
Yeah, I think it's been a combative discussion because it is very close, and it just is a matter of what you prefer. I think Ramon Arias is probably the better player in a vacuum, definitely the better hitter. But I think the defense has slipped a little bit. He can only really play third base and second base. I just think Mateo is a better fit for the 2025 Orioles if you can only keep one. And I don't know if I want a whole nother season with both of them on the Orioles and what that could bring to the discourse. So I think I have to agree, even though I think Ramon Arias is the better player. Maybe this is the time when the trade value is there for him to go, and maybe it's a trade with Mountcastle that we were talking about earlier, or maybe it's just, a move that happens in spring training or something like that.
All right, two more. This one I threw out in our chat earlier, so we'll ask it on the show. Go back to the prospect ranks. looking ahead to 2025, what is your early 2025 prospect flag plant? Who is going to emerge? Who is going to be the guy? Who's going to have the rebound year? What's a strong take you have right now looking down the farm? Start with Zach.
There are so many different directions that I can go in with this question, but I think Frederick Ben-Cosme is going to put together the best season he's had in his career to this point. There were some ups and downs for him at Bowie this year. He got off to a really good start this season, then slumped a little bit over the next few months, and then picked up the pace again as the season wound down. The one thing that I love about Ben Cosme, there's a lot of things I love about Ben Cosme, but one of the things I really love about him as a player is that those walk to strikeout numbers have stayed pretty steady throughout his career. So it's just a matter for me of seeing the power start to come around a little bit and for him to have more success when he puts the ball into play. I think that could be the difference maker. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he goes back to Bowie to start next season, tears through the Eastern League for the first month of the year, gets promoted to Norfolk, and by August, people are clamoring to see him in the major leagues, even if there's not room for him because he's performing so well. So let's go with the full-on Frederick Ben-Cosme breakout.
I like that. I like that a lot. For me, and I will give a specific name eventually, but I think my bold claim is there will be a pitcher from the Orioles system in that breaks out into the top 100 lists, and it's not Povich or McDermott or even Brandon Young. I think it's going to be one of these guys like a Michael Ferret, Keeler Morphe, a Cameron Weston, Edgar Portes, but my guy, I think it's going to be Nestor Erman. I think he's just going to continue. Clearly, the Orioles saw something that no one else knew about in that draft because the Stuff Plus numbers were insane. We've said it. He was up there with Paul Skeens of the world, or at least close to it, and he showed why that was the case. Yeah, maybe it was not against great competition in college. Maybe nobody saw it. Did it even happen? But the Orioles saw it. They drafted him. He had a lights out year, as we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and deservedly so. And if he can get to AA, maybe AAA by the end of 2025, and he's still doing the same things, I can't see a scenario where he's not like getting serious attention from top 100 lists.
I love me some Nestor Herman. I thought you were going to go with my guy here for a second. I'm glad you didn't, because I'm going with Cameron Weston. I'm going to take that side of it. I think he earns a 40-man roster spot. Maybe not necessarily during the season, but he's Rule 5 eligible next year. And not to dive into it. Calm down, Vivek. Not to dive into next year before we even talk about this year's. But you got like Trace Bright, Juan Rojas, Fabian Beavers, Basayo. Like, you got a lot of guys. And obviously, those 40-man spots are getting harder to acquire. The crunch is getting more difficult to sit here and figure out who gets protected, who doesn't, because you have this loaded farm system. But I see Cameron Weston, he could just pitch very well next year, and the Orioles say, we've got so many guys, we don't see a clear path. He's Rule 5 eligible. We're going to trade him next deadline, like we saw a lot of Rule 5 guys get dealt this past season. He could be one of those guys next season, but I'm going to go ahead and say early on that he exceeds that, and the Orioles say, we are adding you to the 40-man roster because he pitches so well. And I think a lot of people, not just us, are going to be talking about him for once, and it's actually already started. I don't know if you guys saw this. Dylan White over at Baseball America. I've spent the last couple of days catching up on articles from the last 2 weeks, because the last 2 weeks, I don't know what time is. But Dylan White, he does these RoboScout articles at Baseball America, and they're awesome. And he did, let me pull out a quote here. Cameron Weston was the cover boy for his article, and this was a piece about underrated pitching prospects. And he's looking at specifically instances in which a pitcher's surface stats in 2024 or underlying stuff plus from the model portend potential future success that exceeds the expectations suggested by the industry's perception of the pitcher. And quote, underneath the hood, Weston is a 3-pitch mix from a low release height, fronted by a 91 mile per hour two-seamer that averages 1.5 foot of arm side run, 80 mile an hour slider, changeup splitter, which have both generated a better than 40% whiff rate each of the last 2 seasons. Although older than, he talked about 2 other prospects from other teams, but although a little bit older, he features less arm speed. Weston has a much higher ground ball rate, reducing his susceptibility to giving up the long ball. His peak projection, 1.28 whip, a 4.10 ERA, is similar to the current publicly facing projection of Brady Singer of the Royals, which is an upper percentile outcome. I'll still take Brady Singer from Cameron Weston, what, an 8th, 9th, 10th round pick out of Michigan that no one talks about. Yeah, that's by flag plant early on.
And we know that changeup / splitter is disgusting, and it's nice to see the numbers back that up.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and good to see the recognition for him nationally as well. We'll go to our final question here, which is from KTGTV. He wants to know, who would we want and who do we think will fill the open positions on the Major League coaching staff? And as a reminder, the Orioles have 2 hitting coach spots open, with Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Salty departing the organization, as well as bench coach, which was Freddie Gonzalez's old role, and the Major League coach, which is now vacant with the departure of Jose Hernandez. And of course, there could be other changes to the coaching staff coming that we don't know about, but let's look at those 4 for now, starting with Nick.
There are like 500 different options to choose from. Internal options, connections this front office has to coaches over the league, the private facilities this organization loves to dip into and hire from. I don't know. I don't have a lot of specific names. I'm sure you guys probably have some. I know Connor, who asked a question earlier, Locked on Orioles, he had a great episode a couple days ago. Again, it might have been 2 weeks ago by now. I'm not sure. But he ran through a lot of names. I'm just going to throw out a couple that I think I'm going to keep my eye on. I think Cody Ashe takes on a larger role because he very quickly went from new hire in the org to working with the big leaguers. He's also an On the Verge live show attendee in the past, so he gets an A+ in my book. I am curious though, like if you go with Ashe as one hitting coach, do they go with another younger coach in the org to pair with him, or do they bring in a veteran? Same with the bench coach dynamic. Like I'm sure Brandon Hyde has a notable say in who that is, but in that conversation between Hyde and the front office, is the conversation more about bringing in another veteran like Freddie Gonzalez, which made sense when Hyde was a rookie manager. But regardless of your opinion about Hyde, he's an award-winning manager with multiple playoff appearances now. So would someone less experienced from the minor league ranks in the org, someone who has meaningful relationships with a lot of the younger players like a Buck Britton, be the move as like a grooming role? I don't know which way they're going to go, obviously, but that's obviously a big option. I think Cody Ashe is going to get a big role, though. And I think Sherman Johnson is going to be a name. I'm just looking at internal options. I'm not going into the external options right now. That's too much. I think Sherman Johnson is a name that I'm going to watch pretty closely. He's only 34 years old. So he's younger than I am. Was playing in the Twin system in 2021. Was playing in indie ball in 2022. 2023, he was hired by the Orioles like weeks after he was playing pro ball to be Bowie's hitting coach. And then this season, they promoted him from AA hitting coach to upper level hitting coordinator. He teamed up with Brink Ambler to be the lower level hitting coordinator. I don't know. We've seen like Mitch Plassmeyer took that trajectory to his current role in the major leagues on the pitching side. I think Sherman Johnson probably takes that role, that trajectory as well. And I know we've heard from the players love him when he was in Bowie. So I think that's another fun name to watch this offseason.
Yeah, I was going to cede my time at least from the major league outside the organization time to that excellent work that Connor Newcomb has done for Locked On Orioles the past few weeks, because it's just, I don't know. It's hard enough to keep track of everything going on with the Orioles. I don't know how people can know about all the ins and outs of the coaching staffs of the other major league teams, but for the in-house options, I do agree Cody Ashe is very much in line to get a significant increase in at least like being notable, being the title of hitting coach rather than hitting strategist. I think Anthony Villa is going to be a hitting coach on this team next year. Maybe it's the Cody Ashley role from this past season, but I do think he'll be at least. They love this guy. They love these guys. We saw that years ago when they brought them to the live show, and it just seems like there's no reason not to. They seem like great guys that know what they're doing. So I think Anthony Villa and Cody Ashley will go from the Full Tilt Brewery to the Orioles clubhouse as far as hitting coaches go. I do think Buck Britton probably is going to get the bench coach job. It just makes too much sense. And then you can move Roberto Mercado up to AAA manager. But yeah, I don't really know. That's my hope, is that it's all in-house, because I just like to see that progression and see these guys get that shot, because they're preaching the same choir down in the minors that they're going to preach in the majors. So why not just keep it all in-house? But they know better than me.
That mention
quick note.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say real quickly about Anthony Villa. I think that's really interesting because I don't want to say like obviously we don't like know him on a personal level. We don't know the ins and outs of this front office and the coaching stuff, but it felt like a weird move to have him director of player development now take over the Matt Blood role. It felt weird to me just because like when we talked with him, not on the show, but when we talked to him at Full Tilt when he came to our live show, like that guy is passionate about the players in the system, especially the hitters. We're just throwing out names and he's going off on these guys about the hitting side of things. I just kind of felt it was kind of weird. Like I feel again, I don't know him, but I feel like he would thrive and really be successful in some sort of role where he's focused solely on the hitters. I like that call as well.
Yeah, I agree. And Bob, your mention of Full Tilt Brewing is making me really miss Hops the Cat, but that's for a separate podcast another day. But Danielle Allentuck of the Banner had a pretty good piece recently looking at some of the internal options. And we've already mentioned a few of them, but one other name I would bring up that she covered is Mike Montville, the hitting coach at Norfolk this year, who had a pretty good debut season in the Orioles organization. So keep an eye out for him. I agree with you guys. I think that Buck Britton is going to have a role somewhere on this major league coaching staff, whether it's Hernandez's old role, one of the hitting coach positions, or as Ben's coach remains to be seen. But right now, I expect him to be on the major league staff. And I think the hitting coach positions, they will go one external option again. Check out Locked on Orioles for a pretty extensive list of names that the Orioles could consider, and one internal option between Johnson, Villa, and Montville. But there's a lot of good options within this organization. So definitely keep an eye out on some of the player development staff that are already with the Orioles. And with that, that does it for this week's episode. We'll be back later in the week, though, with a look at the American League Rookie of the Year race. Is Colton Cowser the favorite? And if not, who could win the award? We'll look at that later on this week. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community. You will have access to patron-exclusive channels within our Discord, as well as bonus episodes throughout the offseason, including our top 50 prospects countdown, which will begin this winter. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to dive into the American League Rookie of the Year race and figure out what are Colton Cowser's chances of winning the award. While he has been recognized by his peers as the outstanding Rookie of the American League in 2024, the Baseball Writers Association award will not be announced until mid-November. So we're going to discuss his chances of winning that award on tonight's episode. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the games. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, to political props. Head to the website today to get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Colton Cowser, as we near this offseason, is one of the favorites to win Rookie of the Year in the American League. After all, he belted 24 home runs, had a F4 of 4, which was second among all rookie outfielders in baseball, and he posted a 120 WRC plus. However, he's by no means a slam dunk to win the award, with a good group of competitors, including Luis Heel, right there in the mix. Now, I should acknowledge the obvious up front, which a lot of detractors are going to point out, which is that the Rookie of the Year race in the American League this year is nowhere near as compelling as it has been the last few years, especially the last 2 years. Cowser doesn't come anywhere close to matching what Gunnar Henderson did last year. He's not at the levels of Julio Rodriguez or Adley Rutschman from 2022, but he objectively put together a very good rookie year. And in the context of 2024, compared to other rookies in the American League, it holds up pretty nicely. And that's why the players recognize Cowser with their most outstanding American League rookie winner over the weekend. But the Baseball Writers Association's decision on the main award is looming. Now, the writers have voted, but we're not going to know the results of that until mid-November. Let's just start, though, with an overview of Cowser's rookie season, with what we think went well and what we didn't. And with that, I'll start with Nick.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, regardless of whether he wins the Rookie of the Year honors or not, I think two things stood out to me. One, that he won the award, like you said, from his peers voting him for that honor, which I think speaks volumes about how the rest of the league views him. But otherwise, like, I don't know. Whether or not he wins this award is irrelevant to me, to be honest. I'm sure it means a lot to him. I'm sure it means a lot to New Orleans to get that draft pick. Of course, that would be awesome. But what's most important to me is that Colton Cowser, this was a guy who Twitter trolls, YouTube commenters had buried over and over again. Going back to his time in Aberdeen, they were burying this guy. The Colton Cowser problem. He wasn't a popular draft pick. Go even further. He wasn't a popular draft pick at the time. I was skeptical as well of the Cowser pick, but we had Stephen Loftus back on the show at that time. He was hyping up Cowser before the draft. Really did a great job of selling him after the draft when we brought him back to talk about who there was picked. I bought the Colton Cowser hype that Stephen was selling after that time, and I'm glad I did. Like, I was ready to see what this guy could do. I just think now we're talking about his chances of winning AL Rookie of the Year honors, when I didn't even think coming into this season, as big of a Colton Cowser guy as I am, and I've gone on my numerous rants on this show. Every time he hits his valleys and he struggles and Twitter wants to bury the guy, like, I've gone on here and rant after rant after rant defending Colton Cowser. But coming into the year, I didn't think it was going to, I thought it was Kerstad's job to lose. I thought he was going to get that spot. We figured there's one open spot. It was either going to be Cowser's or Kerstad. I thought for sure it was Kerstad, and Cowser would go back to AAA, at least for a little while. Whatever he worked on the offseason, just show that can translate consistently into games, and then he'd get another shot at AAA or in the major leagues, because his first stint in the majors was not good, obviously. But he came out hot in spring, won the job, and now here we are talking about him as potential Rookie of the Year. And I think trying to look at this as objectively as possible, I think he honestly really deserves it. You can nitpick at some of the stats, but he was a regular in this lineup every single night and put up unbelievable numbers. And so, yeah, and you talk about the defense. I don't think there's any questions about the defense anymore after what he showed this year.
Great answer. Yeah, whether he wins or he's runner-up, he's probably no worse than top two. I can't imagine. And regardless, like, This guy is either going to win Rookie of the Year or come very close. And I've never heard more complaints about a player of this caliber in his rookie season at the ripe old age of 24. I don't understand it. People hate strikeouts, and clearly the Orioles and Cowser decided together when it was like, do we go contact first or impact first? They decided to lean into his power, and it's just going to equal more strikeouts, and it's been fine. I mean, it's not fun to watch sometimes, but he put up a 120 WRC plus on offense, 331 x WOBA. He had 4 F WAR. And if you go to Baseball Savant, he's 96 percentile range in the outfield, 96 percentile arm strength, 75th percentile speed. Like, he's doing everything other than, he could maybe learn to just, he needs work on the changeup. But we saw him adjust in the beginning of the year. Then the league adjusts back. Then he adjusted again. And this is where he ended up. And again, it was his rookie season at age 24. He's going to continue to improve and develop. He talked about wanting to get the strikeouts down, but I would hope he doesn't sacrifice the power because he's got a 90th percentile barrel percentage, 77 percentile hard hit rate. His average exit velocity is well above average. Bat speed is well above average. Like, he is a power hitter. I would not be surprised if he hits more home runs than Heston Kjerstad continuously throughout his career, even though Heston Kjerstad is known as more of the slugger. So I just think Colton Cowser, one of the most underrated players in Orioles fandom, at least. I know some people hate that there was a Moo night at the park or whatever that caused the ruckus. Like, I don't know what the controversy is with Colton Cowser. I think he's just an incredibly good player that can play center field, left field in Camden Yards. If you're going to lock someone up that's not going to be Gunnar Henderson or Adley Rutschman, let it be Colton Cowser. Like, keep this guy here. I think he's going to be a valuable player for a very long time.
You look at the American League rookie class, and we'll take a deeper dive in a moment, but it seems like it's a lot of players who had solid seasons overall, but all of them have some blemish, whether it's bad platoon splits, maybe not enough playing time, or in the case of Luis Heel, who probably is Calder's strongest competitor for the award, he led the American League in walks. Cowser, if there is a blemish, it's the 30% strikeout rate. That's actually just south of 31%. And I know what the two of you are going to say when I ask this question, which is he hit 243. Should that matter? And I think your answer is going to differ from some voters of the award.
Yeah, that's the issue. Trying to decide these dusty old voters, the West Coast voters who never watched him play once this year. A lot of guys, a lot of voters, I'm sure are just going to pull up MLB.com stats page and look at the bare bones stats. If there's anything to Cowser's advantage is that he led all rookies, at least on the American League side of things, with 24 home runs. I don't know if that was overall or not. But 24 home runs led all AL rookies. Like, maybe that helps the case. People love the home runs. The defense received high praise. Maybe that helps him. But yeah, it's getting into the mind. We could sit here and talk about all the data and the numbers that truly paint the picture of what type of player Colton Cowser was. But you wonder, like, how many of the voters actually are going to take the time to dive into that.
Yeah, that it is a good point, and one that maybe I'm a little bit nervous about when it comes to the voting that's going to come out. But no, obviously I don't think it's that big of a deal. And he does have an above average, 14% above average walk rate. So he's getting on base, a 321 OBP with a 242 average. Again, it's like, what if he had a 260 average and walked a little bit less? Like, I don't know. I think, some teams, and hey, he plays for the Orioles. Austin Wells plays for the Yankees. Luis Heel plays for the Yankees. That could also come into play as well. But I feel like Cowser's the guy for me. He would have my vote. And obviously I'm biased, but even if I try to take off the orange colored glasses, I just see him as being a guy that played every day all year long and put up some really, really solid numbers.
In talking about Cowser's case for a moment, if you're going to look at his overall value, I don't think that you can talk about his season without talking about his defense. He's a Gold Glove finalist, and by just about every measure, he had a really, really good year on defense and more than covered left field at Camden Yards, which we have seen players struggle to do since the fence moved back. And he actually proved to be a guy that you could put in center field in the pinch. When Cedric Mullins was banged up or he just needed a day off, you could put Cowser out there and you weren't nervous about how things were going to go if there was a fly ball in the gap that he needed to run down. More often than not, he made the plays that he needed to make. And a few years ago, we saw Ryan Mountcastle not win Rookie of the Year, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that his defense was not very good. So even though he led I think it was all rookies in baseball, or at least all rookies in the American League in home runs that year, he wasn't even a finalist for the award because his defense dragged down his overall value so much. How much should Cowser's defense come into play as voters weigh this decision?
Honestly, I mean, it's a big part of the game, and it's not like it's fantasy baseball where it's like, well, yeah, he's a great defender, but what does that mean for me? Well, this is supposed to be an award based on the value you bring to the team versus your peers, and I was just happy to see that the Colton Cowser that we grew up watching him grow up in the minor leagues, his defense, great jumps, great reads, great routes. That was not a mirage. It was just an adjustment period in 2023. Yeah, he did not look great out there in his brief time. He struggled all around, but it was nice to see that, at least for my own sanity, that he's a great defender that we thought he was going to be. And yeah, he can play center field. He might not be Cedric Mullins out there as far as range, because who is? But when it comes to left field, if you thought Austin Hayes was like, we can't lose him, who's going to play left field at Camden Yards? Well, Colton Cowser does it much better. It makes it look much easier. Just fantastic defense. Perfect for Camden Yards left field. I can't wait till Enrique Bradfield, Judd Fabian. Like, outfield is going to be covered for the foreseeable future at Camden Yards, and Colton Cowser is a big part of that. And I think it should definitely play a role. So, yeah, you steal 9 bases, you pop 24 home runs, and you play Gold Glove caliber defense. That seems like Rookie of the Year potential.
Yeah, as far as hitters go, just looking at the hitters and comparing him there, like, he's the top of the class. Like, led all AL rookies 24 home runs. Everyday guy for a playoff team. Honestly, looking at these numbers, if Lawrence Butler from Oakland didn't have 110 fewer plate appearances, I would say Butler's in the conversation because he had 22 home runs and a 130 WRC plus. I feel like I was drafting him in like daily fantasy every day because I feel like he had a home run every single night when you look at the box scores. But Cowser was a 4 WAR player, a 120 WRC plus, played in 153 games. I think that's underrated as well. You've got Austin Wells, you've got a couple of Boston guys who had good rookie years, but Cowser, I think the defense is the separator as far as the hitters are concerned, because Bob mentioned off the baseball savant numbers defensively. Like, yeah, the 11 outs above average, 96th percentile, arm strength, top of the class, 75th percentile in sprint speed. Maybe didn't show up on the stolen base paths, but it showed up defensively with the defensive highlights. If you had questions about the defense coming into the year, you don't anymore. I just think it comes down to Cowser and Luis Heel. I think Sporting News, I saw, gave it to Mason Miller. Okay, Sporting News, calm down a little bit. But that leads my other point here to what separates Heel from Cowser for me. And trying to look at this as objectively as possible. We are Orioles fans. We are biased. We're not going to hide that. But for me, I'm not giving it to Mason Miller because you're a reliever. But my reasoning for Cowser over Heel is the same reason why in the NL, I would give it to Jackson Merrill over Paul Skeens, is because the hitters step up and make an impact every single day versus every 5+ days. And like, maybe that's a dumb way to look at this or a wrong way to look at that. But that's my bias in this. Like, it's hard for me. If you're a pitcher, I think you really got to shine to overdo it or to overcome a hitter like Cowser. Like that's tough for me because yeah, you can make a big impact once a week, but like that's it. Cowser's going out there doing it every single night. But with Heel, like it is tough because you're talking about, what Cowser's 242 average hurt him with looking at who votes for these awards. Louis Heel, yeah, he led the league in walks, but he also had 15 wins. He's 15-7 for the New York Yankees, a World Series team. Like, how much is that? He had 10 quality starts. He had 6 starts where he went 5+ innings and didn't give up a single earned run. Like, he was a very good pitcher, sure, but yeah, it's hard for me to get over that bias of the hitter over the pitcher in this scenario.
Yeah, and with Heel and Cowser, I think that it seems like the race has kind of narrowed down to those two guys, even though it is possible that Austin Wells or one of the players on Boston, or maybe even Mason Miller, surprises us and wins this award. And with Heel and Cowser, it felt like the momentum just kind of volleyed back and forth between the two players all season. Cowser got off to that strong start in April, but then really struggled over the month of May as Heel was turning things up. But then if you look at how their first and second half splits break down, they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. Cowser did not have that good of a first half, really rebounded in the second half, while Heel was excellent in the first half and good, but kind of comparatively pedestrian in the second half. We saw the walks go up, the strikeouts came down, the ERA went up, whereas across the board, Cowser was pretty much a better player in the second half. So, how do you guys think that that's going to stand out to voters, if it even does at all, where maybe one player never took the momentum away from the other and ran with it, but you could still see some discrepancies in when they were performing at their best?
I think the word you were looking for Luis Heel's second half was mid, and I think Colton Cowser has more Riz. I'm trying to lower the age demographic to this podcast. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's better, at least from the eyes of the voters, I would imagine, to finish strong than get off to a great start. And then it's not like, I mean, Luis Heel, like, great pitcher. He had a great season. There's no doubt about it. And I would still, hats off to him. Second place is just fine. But he did kind of stagnate a little bit in the second half, whereas Cowser got off to a great start. First, like, 2-3 weeks, he was on fire. Then he cooled off considerably, but he made his adjustments. He hung in there, and whether it was due to some injuries where he kept getting everyday at-bats or not, he was still out there, and he improved and had a really, really good second half. Yeah, I think that should matter, or if it shouldn't, then it probably does anyway.
Luis, you said they've already voted, right? So his World Series appearance, okay. Because I was wondering if they hadn't voted yet, and I think he's pitching Tuesday or Wednesday night's game. If he has a great outing, of course he's going to win the award. But okay, so that's irrelevant. Luis Heel is also 26 years old and made his major league debut in 2021. I know he's had injuries, but he entered with like 30 something innings under his belt, missed all of 2023 due to an injury, only pitched one game at the major league level in 2022, but still, it's a 26-year-old guy who made his debut in 2021. Cowser's 24 years old, made his debut last year, but a cup of coffee. This year, first full year, and the Orioles were still one of the best teams in baseball. Like, I just, again, trying to look at this as objectively as possible. Either way, I don't think you make the wrong choice, but I just don't see how, if you take away Yankees off Heel's jersey, if you just look at these guys, their statistical resumes, I don't see how you give it to Luis Heel over Colton Cowser.
And for those Orioles fans that want to cope if and when Luis Heel upsets Colton Cowser for the Rookie of the Year, the Yankees do not get a bonus draft pick for Luis Heel because he does not qualify due to one of the rules. That's probably he wasn't on top 100 prospect list before the season, whereas Austin Wells would have netted the Yankees a bonus draft pick, and Colton Cowser will net the Orioles that bonus first round draft pick.
And since you bring up Austin Wells, I'll just throw this out there so we don't, risk missing anything here. Is there someone other than Heel or Cowser that could win this award? Because it seems like there was kind of some rumbling about Wells in the second half of the season, but then that cooled off a little bit. So is there anyone realistically outside of Heel or Cowser that could take the award?
I
I
really
mean, if
don't
you
think so.
no,
I'm looking at the odds here. It's Luis Heel seems like he's negative 200. Colton Cowser's around plus 200. Austin Wells plus 400. And then after that, it's like Wilmer Abreu plus 6,000. So I really don't think so. I don't know where Mason Miller's coming from the Sporting News. Is that a real publication anymore? I don't know. But I think it's between really Heel and Cowser with maybe Austin Wells like a very, very outside shot.
yeah, I mean, Wells was fine, 3.4 F4, so right behind. He was second to Cowser in terms of F4 for the rookies. But I just, again, this is just how I'm looking at it as voting. If again, take away Orioles, take away Yankees, I'm just looking at this, and if I'm looking at home runs, I'm looking at games played, I'm looking at WRC plus. Cowser is the best of the best there in terms of the hitters, and it's an everyday thing. Yeah, that's what I just keep going back to. It's again, I'm giving it to Jackson Merrill over Paul Skeens because Paul Skeens was great. He's going to have a fantastic career, hopefully. I'm looking forward to all those battles over the next 10 years between Skeens and the rest of the league. But Jackson Merrill did that thing every night for the Padres and helped lead them to a playoff appearance. Same thing with Colton Cowser. Like, where are the Orioles without Colton Cowser? Struggling. So, yeah.
Now, I will throw out some historical context that may make Orioles fans feel better. Although there's always that sort of, gripe about big market bias, and I think that is true in some cases. Recent history has not really been kind to the Yankees in Rookie of the Year races. They've had one Rookie of the Year winner in this century, and that was Aaron Judge in 2017, who had a historically great rookie season. There was no denying that. Now, there was a long period of time where the Yankees weren't necessarily producing a lot of homegrown talent, but still, go back to 2005, Robinson Cano and Houston Street in the top two for Rookie of the Year voting. Houston Street ends up beating out Cano. So sometimes that big market factor doesn't come into play with Rookie of the Year. And then as for the starting pitching aspect of this, if you don't count Shohei Ohtani's 2018 season, which I don't because he got it because he was a two-way player and he didn't pitch all of 2018, a starting pitcher has not won American League Rookie of the Year since Michael Fulmer back in 2016. So it's been a while for pitchers in the American League.
I believe that's former Oriole, Michael Fulmer, to you.
I also wonder, too, if, the Orioles had Gunnar Henderson last year. They had the strong performance from Adley Rutschman. You've got this unbelievable farm system that's been touted for the last 3+ years. I almost wonder if some voters could even look at this and say, man, another one. Orioles did it again. Yep, it's Cowser. It's the Orioles. This is what they do. I wonder if that's any advantage to him whatsoever in some voters' minds.
I would hope so. I mean, I think that if Cowser does win the award, even if he doesn't win the award, this is a testament to the player development staff. And I'm going to say it. It's a testament to the work that Matt Borgsalty and Ryan Fuller did during their time in Baltimore, that Cowser was able to rebound the way that he did. Now, I think we'll wrap here with this. We're not going to know until November 18th, I believe, who wins this award. But voters have already voted. There's nothing that's going to change the outcome of this race between now and then. Does Colton Cowser win American League Rookie of the Year? We're going to have more predictions for the offseason next week, but we'll make this one now.
Yes, and I think if you look at the odds, only they are taking into account the Yankees bias, and I feel like they're also probably just trying to figure out it's more than just who they think is going to win. It's who they want the money to be put on. I think the smart money is on Colton Cowser, especially at those odds. I feel like it should be at least even odds between the two to get plus odds on Colton Cowser. I mean, I put $10 on him before the season started at like plus 750 or something like that. So Yeah, I think it's going to be Colton Cowser all the way. I think we'll be talking about him winning the award in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah. I told you before the season started when we talked about this, everyone wanted to go Holiday, and I said if you're gonna bet, put the money on Colton Cowser. That was the smarter bet. Bob did it. I did not, and I regret it because I think that bet is going to cash. Don't think I can, but I'd have to go offshore and I stick to DraftKings. But no free ads. I'm gonna say yeah, he wins it. I keep hearing the voice say no, he doesn't win it because Heel is a Yankee. But after us talking about this, some of those points Zach brought up at the end there, I feel a little bit more confident in Cowser winning this thing.
I think it's going to be Cowser in a very close race. Either way, I think it's going to be close because I think, as we kind of covered tonight, there was never a point where one player clearly separated himself from the other. But I do think that it's going to be a close race with Cowser winning.
All right, so let's
And
talk
we
about
will,
those political odds that we talk about in the ad from Bet Online.
Yeah.
Wrap up.
Jill Stein. What's the odds on Jill Stein?
I'm not going to touch that one. And that does it for this week's episode. We will be back next week with our off-season predictions, covering all things Orioles, what trades they might make, what players they might or might not sign, who will be back in Baltimore next year, who might be on the coaching staff. We will look at all of those things on next week's show. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today. You will have bonus content available to you throughout the off season, as well as exclusive access to Patreon channels within our Discord community. You don't want to miss out on that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.